Hello and welcome to this Chess Beginner to Winner series, lesson 24, using pawns to attack. And today we have a pretty good game here. As you see here, the white player is Tigran Petrosian, a former world chess champion who was known for preventing counterplay by his opponents and slowly squeezing them for a win. So let's take a look at this game. In the review, the computer says that Tigran Petrosian played with 96.7% accuracy versus his opponent at 88. And he had two great moves and only one miss. His opponent played pretty well, but had three inaccuracies and two mistakes. All right, so getting on with the game here. It started out with d4 by Petrosian. So d4 usually leads to more strategic games, and usually the center is more closed. So his opponent responds with knight to f6, which prevents an immediate e4, and it kind of waits to see what your opponent does. So Petrosian, because he can't play e4, he plays c4, helping to cover this d5 square. And now we have e6. So this move helps cover d5, and it'll allow a possible d5 pawn push in the future. And it also lets black bring his bishop out, where he may go here and possibly pin a knight. But we'll see what happens. So knight to c3, just developing, helping to control this e4 square. And now d5 is played. So the game has transposed into the Queen's Gambit declined, which is usually d4, d5, c4, and then e6. So moving on, we have a capture here. So now we have this exchange on d5. And with that, it kind of releases the tension in the center. So the e-pawn captures, and so now we have equal pawns in the center, and both sides have a knight developed. So the game continues with bishop to g5, pinning this knight to the queen here. And now this move, knight to d7, to back that up. And you may think, well, hold on a minute, this knight is pinned. Can I pick off this pawn? But that would be a mistake here, because after knight captures, leaving the queen under attack, if you try to pick off this queen, well, then black has this bishop to b4 move attacking the king, and the king is trapped in here. So the only move available is to block with the queen. And then now we have, let's see, it looks like best is just to capture the bishop over here on d8. And second best would be capturing the queen immediately. So, I guess we could look at this move. You could either capture the queen immediately, but the computer says this is the best move here, because that queen is still pinned. If the queen captures, well, then the knight just jumps in and threatens a fork here. So now it looks like the computer wants g3, or even e3. So then h4 is a third here. Well, anyway, no matter what, if we look at material here, white is ahead in material, but the queen is about to be captured. So if we were to play, the top computer recommended move, well, now you could go ahead and capture, or you could even wait longer and just develop the rook. But, if we capture, now the king is stuck in the center here. Then you can play rook to e8. And in this position, now things have changed, and it's +2 for black. So black would just be ahead here. If we look at the material, let's see. So black just has an extra knight here. And what does white get for that? 1 pawn. All right, well, that is a little mistake that you don't want to fall into. So let's get back to the game. And I'll go back to the beginning and run through the moves again real quick. So d4, knight to f6, c4, e6. Then the knight develops, pawn, capture, capture, and the pin. And then the knight develops here, and we saw that you cannot capture that pawn or it would lead to trouble. So white just plays ahead here with e3 with this pawn, fortifying the central d pawn. And now there would be room for that queen to escape, I guess. So the pin is broken here with this bishop to e7 move to fight against this bishop on g5. All right, and now bishop to d3. So both sides just continuing development here. And we'll get to the pawn play here shortly after the opening. And a lot of beginners, they might wonder, well, what should I do with my pawns? Sometimes they just sacrifice their pawns all over the board, and then they just end up losing because they're behind material in the end game. So first you just want to play as these chess masters are playing here, developing all their pieces, castling, getting the king safe. So developing your rook on half open files like this. The queen is developing now, targeting the king side with this battery here. And the queen can help fight for this half open c file. And now we have this move fortifying the d pawn, kind of blocking the scope of the queen, and if a rook moves here, the queen and rook battery that could be coming down the line here. So now we have h3. This is kind of a preventative move. It keeps the knight, from moving down here. It could keep the bishop from coming down here later. And it could help with a possible kingside thrust of this g pawn. So now we have a mistake by Petrosian's opponent here. Knight to e4, and the computer does not like that. It says that best in that position would have been, let's see. Well, now it's showing 3 different moves: h6, knight to f8, or this knight to e4 move. It's even showing that up here. Let's go look at this knight to f8, and now it's saying that that is best, which helps fortify this h-pawn that the queen and bishop are piling up on here. All right, so if we get back to, well, we could take a look at this knight to f8, and then it shows just castling here for white, and then h6 chasing this pawn or forcing it to capture the knight. So play would continue in that way. Now, if we go back to the game, after this h3 move, the mistake move, knight to e4, and then I guess we'll see why this is a mistake. The computer down here is still showing the game's about even, that bishop to f4 is the best move. And then second best is either bishop takes e4 or bishop takes e7 up here, attacking the queen. So in the game, we had bishop to f4. And according to the computer, that is a miss. That the best move would have been instead to capture, attacking the queen here. And then the best response would be a queen capture. And now to ignore this knight and just castle to continue the game. And the game would be slightly in white's favor, but still about even. Let's see here. So if we go back, once again, after the h3 move, the knight jumps into this outpost on e4. Although, there's a possibility of just chasing it away with the pawn here. But then that could weaken this e-pawn, and you don't want to do that, especially when there's a rook lined up on your king and you haven't even castled yet, and then it could create weaknesses around. So you don't want to attack with the pawns yet if that's going to cause weaknesses around your king side, especially if you're still thinking about maybe castling there. So this f3 move, that may not be a good time to attack with the pawns because of kind of the gaps. It would leave a hole here on g3 that maybe the opponent could exploit. It would weaken this e-pawn in the center. So anyway, the bishop retreats back here, and now maybe this bishop could cover this hole, and maybe then you would push this pawn. But in the game, we had black responding with knight to f6 here to back up this pawn, or excuse me, to back up this knight on e4. Now we have the pawn attack here. So now it's all right to do this with the bishop here protecting this pawn, and also you're covering this gap here, and the knight is under attack. So black is forced to make a decision here, and he just tries to trade down some material, which is best, and the game is still about even here. So Petrosian captures towards the center with a pawn, bringing this less powerful b-pawn in closer to the center, where it can help support d5. It could possibly be pushed forward in the future to attack this central pawn. So the game continues with bishop to d6. So Petrosian's opponent, his strategy appears to be to try and trade down more material, maybe get rid of the defender of this central pawn here. And so the computer says that this is a mistake, that better would have been to immediately attack the center with c5 here, using the pawn to attack the central pawn. So that's another important theme when you use pawns to attack. The most valuable pawns in general are almost always the most valuable pawns are the ones in the center here to help control the center. Unless you have a pawn that's about to promote, then that might be a very important pawn, or one that is defending your king and holding the game together. There's always exceptions to the general rules, but in general, the central pawns, the D and E pawn, are the most important pawns. Especially here, they're helping control the center. And so a strategy you can use is to push a pawn on the side and attack those pawns in the center. So you use a less valuable pawn on the side here to attack the more valuable central pawn. So that's what black should have done according to the computer. So now in the game, we had bishop to d6, trying to trade off material here and get rid of this bishop that's defending the unprotected pawn here. So Petrosian plays a great move. He just goes ahead and captures here. Now, I guess we'll see why this move is so great. The queen has to capture, of course, to keep the material even. But now this allows the pawn push of e4. And you might think, well, shouldn't I be getting my king to safety somehow? Should I really push the pawn in the center with my king still stuck here? But this pawn, when it moves forward, it's fortified pretty good by the f pawn and also by this battery of queen and bishop here. So Petrosian is using his pawns to attack now. He's, of course, attacking the d pawn here, but more importantly, he's threatening to push forward here to e5 and fork the knight and the queen with this pawn. So, the queen would have to retreat, and then the knight would be picked off here. So that is the coming threat that must be dealt with. And so what does Petrosian's opponent do here? Well, the computer says retreating the knight to d7 would be best, but the opponent makes an inaccurate move here, moving the knight to the edge of the board. And usually a knight on the rim is dim, so that saying definitely applies here. The knight is not as well positioned here. So now the game has jumped to +1 or even higher after this move. It's showing plus 1.9 in white's favor. So, what should Petrosian do now? Well, he plays another great move with e5 here, attacking the queen, gaining space. So you can use your pawns to attack, of course, but one way to do that instead of directly attacking pieces like this queen is to push them forward, giving you more space for your pieces to funnel in behind. And another general rule is that you should attack in the direction that your central pawns are pointing. So now all these pawns are pointing to the king side, and there's more space in that direction for the pieces to funnel in behind, aim at the king side, and hopefully break through with an advantage. So the queen has to move here, and we have queen to h6. The computer says queen to e7 would have been best, but this is still an excellent move according to the computer. And so now the game continues with... and one other point here. So there's another possible threat looming of g4 pushing forward and attacking this knight. And now the knight is going to be trapped. But with the queen here covering this square, the knight has one move to jump here and attack the knight and also attack the bishop here. So, this is why the queen moved here. So, I don't know, if we go back, if the queen moved up here to e7, I guess we could take a look at that, because you think the knight would just be trapped. So, queen to e7. Now, if you had this immediate g4, okay, there would be a possible queen check down here. And then that could give that knight the possibility to jump in here and attack the knight. Well, let's take a look at it, because it starts to get a little tricky here. So what if you do that? Well, then you have this queen to h4 check move. The king would have to move. Let's see. King would move there, and it would allow the knight to just jump in there and fork the knight and the rook there. So, the knight would probably capture, the queen would recapture, then this pawn would be under attack. Anyway, so that is why that move wouldn't be played. All right, so back to the action. The queen was attacked with this good attacking pawn move. So the queen moves over here to give the knight a chance to jump in here, attacking the bishop and the knight. So what does Petrosian do now? Well, he plays this queen move, which the computer says is best, attacking the queen and threatening, possibly to break the pawns up, or once again threatening this possibility right here of attacking the knight and trapping the knight. So we have a queen capture, and the computer says that that's not even the best move. It looks like, well, now it's saying it's the best. Queen takes d2. And I think it wanted that g5 move. G5, I guess, avoids the trade, allows the knight to retreat back here. So that's an interesting alternative, just pushing this pawn to block the queen and give the knight room to escape. All right, so in the game, we have a trade of queens, but this actually seems to help Petrosian. So after the queens are traded off, now we have this knight, the threat of the knight being trapped after this g4 move of the pawn. So to avoid this pawn attack, to escape that pawn attack, this move is played g6, which will allow the knight to retreat. And of course, Petrosian attacks with his pawn, sending that knight back to g7, which is not the greatest square. It can reposition up here, and so that would be a better spot for that knight. But in the game, Petrosian just pushes forward, throwing his pawns in a pawn storm towards the king side, using his pawns to attack. Now, you might think, is that wise with the king in the center to just throw all your pawns forward? Well, here it's okay because of the state of the central pawns here. The center is kind of blocked and not moving too much. So the king is still pretty safe in here behind these blocked pawns. If the center was open, then you definitely would want to get that king safe. And there's not much going on over here on the queen side at the moment either. So the king's pretty safe here. So you shouldn't have any problem with the king protected here behind these central pawns. You can go ahead and push these pawns forward. So black tries to set up some kind of defense here. So if this pawn is pushed, this one could possibly be thrown forward, or if this one moves forward, this pawn could kind of lock up the king side here, because black would not, he doesn't want to have lines opened up against his king if he can help it there. So the rook swings over here to help in the push of these pawns up towards the king side. And now we have bishop to d7, an inaccuracy by black here. So what would have been best? Looks like a5. The computer's also saying h5 or king to f8. A5 would kind of try and gain some space on the queen side. You could possibly start throwing these pawns forward and try and break through over here. Now the computer's saying that is best. Now it recommends rook at h to g1, and then black would start throwing his pawns forward, trying to generate an attack on the queen side. All right, so back to the game action. After the rook moved to f1, the computer says that's good, but it prefers rook at h to g1 to line up on the king there. So we have bishop to d7, the inaccuracy by Petrosian's opponent. And let's see if we can figure out why that might be an inaccuracy. Well, now we have rook to g1 being played, lining up on the king, and also helping guard this pawn in case there's some kind of attack building with the bishop here and a pawn coming forward, possibly. But the main reason is probably just to line up on the king here. And if the position breaks open, this rook could be attacking, or even pinning this knight to the king, causing problems. So b5, the best move, trying to generate some kind of play over here on the queen side, so attacking with those pawns. But white, his attack over here on the king side is already in full swing, and he'll get his attack in first before black is able to do anything over here on the queen side. So f4, the best move, and the pawns are just moving up the board, getting ready to just press forward and attack. So now we have black trying to get counterplay over here on the queen side, but the attack continues here on the king side, which is more important at the moment because that's where black's king is. So now we have capture, which is an inaccuracy. So if we go back and look at that, the computer wanted b4 to at least break some lines open here, attack this pawn here possibly, but just to generate some kind of counterplay over here. And that's now it recommends that white ignores that on the queen side and just captures here. F takes g6, so the game could continue like this, capture, capture, and now rook to f6 is recommended, putting pressure on this pawn, with the bishop also piling up on that. And that's interesting that this wasn't captured right away. This move here, since the file is open, would allow white to more easily double up his pawns possibly, but it's building some pressure up on this pawn, and well, both pawns since they're side by side. And it looks like now c5 is the most recommended move, and now you would want to go ahead and capture one of these pawns, and looks like rook to f8 to stop the threat building on this open file, especially if both rooks would double up there. And now we have knight to f4. So you get the picture. White would just start funneling his pieces in behind these pawns, and he's building up an attack here. I won't dig too much deeper into it. You could set it up on the board and check it out further if you would like. But back to the end of the game here. So f5, pushing forward, attacking with this f pawn. We have a capture here, which was an inaccuracy, because now black has stopped his attack on the queen side, and he's just being forced to counter what white's doing. So that's another good theme when there are attacks on opposite wings of the chessboard. If you can get your attack going strong enough where your opponent has to stop what they're doing and just respond to your attack, well, then you kind of steer the game, and call the shots basically, because you are doing the attacking and forcing them to respond to what you're doing, and they don't have time to go ahead and get their attack in or continue what they had planned. So a recapture. Now this line is open. The knight is pinned. There's a threat of this pawn moving forward and pinning, moving forward and attacking the pinned knight, which wouldn't be able to move, and then it could be picked off. So the king moves out of the line of fire here so that this knight won't be pinned. And now here, we look at f6. That's the third best move. So a beginner might think, well, I should just keep pushing these pawns forward and push this f pawn forward, attacking the knight. But that could allow the knight to move forward either to h5 or towards the center here to e6. It looks like the computer prefers h5, moving in this direction. So, that would also kind of blockade this h pawn. Anyway, instead of making a possible beginner mistake like f6, e6 is played. And so this is the best move and the way to get a bigger advantage here. So attack the bishop and attack the pawn. So this kind of forces a decision to be made here. The bishop is under attack, so if that bishop retreats, then this pawn would just be captured. So it looks like, of course, you're forced to capture. That's the best move. But now, instead of recapturing, there's an even better move. Attacking with the pawn, chasing this knight away. And it looks like the best move is knight to f5. So that's what is played. Now you're attacking this undefended pawn. There is a possibility that the knight could be captured, but then this pawn could just recapture and be protected by the bishop. So let's see how the final moves of the game play out here and what Petrosian does. So he goes ahead and just knocks that knight out because the knight is harassing this pawn. It's moving closer into his position. He knocks it out, and the pawn is forced to recapture. Well, now this pawn is kind of weak here. The only thing protecting it is the bishop. And, should he put more pressure on that pawn with his knight? What should he do here? Well, the best move is rook to g6 here, which is interesting. But the second best move is rook to g7. So Petrosian finds the second best move. We could look at that rook to g6 move, which attacks this pawn, but it leaves more room for this king to move, whereas this move traps the black king. And so the best response would be rook to f8 and just let this bishop be captured, because also, in addition to trapping the king here in the corner, the bishop is under attack. And, at this point, white is just winning. If rook to f8 is the best move, black will be able to capture this pawn, but then the bishop will be lost. So in the game, in the game, that move wasn't played. Black just resigned here. So we'll take a look at why he resigned. The computer says that the game could have gone with this, then a capture, knight to f4, rook to e8 here, rook to g1, b4, attacking this pawn. Ignoring that, and just pushing forward here. So, I don't know. We'll play this out a little bit further. Capture. King captures his best. Now we have a possible rook to e3 check. And it looks like that would be best to play. And then king to c2. So that's interesting. You don't attack the rook, but play king to c2. That way you can keep an eye on this pawn if you have to. And now it looks like the best move is, actually, to bring this one up to here. But then the knight can just pick that off. So capture, capture. And now white is just really winning here. Now, I want to go back before I end this video and just take a look at this move here. Capture, and then attacking the bishop here. You might have asked, well, why don't you just protect that bishop? Let's see here. If you try, I don't know, something like this, well then there's a mate in 9, but it begins with knight to f4, jumping up here. Now, you're threatening an immediate mate here with knight to f6 mate. So what do you do about that? You know, if you play a random move like a4 or b4, well then it's just a mate in 1 with knight to g6 mate. So it looks like you'd have to try something like this. Rook to e2 check. Then the king, of course, would just pick that off. And then you have, let's see, bishop to e8 here. And now rook at f to g1. So now you're threatening to check. The king would have to move to h7, and then you bring the other rook up for checkmate. So it looks like, I don't know, your best responses are blocking with the bishop, you know, or either going here as well. So if you block with the bishop, well then you would have knight, oh sorry, that was the wrong move. Bishop to h5, but then the knight could just pick that off, I guess. So bishop to h5, it's saying is best. And now you're in check. King can just swing over. Then you have rook to e8, threatening to check again. And now it recommends rook at 1 to g6, but then you could also just do this, forcing the bishop to capture, and then you just capture here. Now you're threatening the mate there, so you know, nothing can be done. You could check, but then after a capture, then a pawn move, and then you deliver mate over here. We'll go back. We could look at the one other possibility. Let's see. We looked at rook at a to d8. Does it make a difference if this one moved here? Well, now you just continue once again with this. And that's the best move. But now the bishop can move up here and keep an eye on that square, so the knight to g6 move can't deliver mate. But then we have rook to e1, threatening to pick that bishop off. And now it looks like the best move is bishop to f7 there, you know, with h5. Let's see. Well, here, if you play bishop to f7, the rook would just pick that bishop off. And I don't know, things would last a little bit longer. If you go here, bishop to h5, well then it looks like best is just bringing up the other rook here. Have both rooks on the 7th rank and try and get in there and trap that king. So I don't know, we could take a look at that. So let's see here. First, we'll look at this one right here because, well, no, you can just pick that off there as well. So either way, you could just pick that off with the knight. But it wouldn't lead to immediate mate. This here is threatening a pretty quick mate. So let's see. Anyway, your threat is to go here and here, but the king would be able to escape out there, and then you could just swing the other rook up. So let's say, I don't know, something like this was played. Well, then you could have rook to h7. The king is forced to go here. Then rook at e to g7. The king is forced to go over here. And then, something like that. Anyway, we'll go back here and just do a quick review on how the pawns were used to attack. So you just play out the opening sequence here, until black gets castled. And now the pawns just start pushing forward. So you attack this knight, forcing black to make a decision. He captures. It brings a pawn closer into the center where it can be used for attack or defense. So now the bishops are traded, but this allows the e-pawn to push forward and start attacking. So there's a threat of the fork of the queen and the knight here. So the knight moves, but the queen is attacked with the pawn. The queen moves, but now we have this trading off of the queens because now there's a threat of attacking on g4 or pushing to g4, attacking the knight and trapping it. So an escape square is made, but we attack it anyway, and that lets us start rolling our pawns forward. So you want to have pieces behind your pawns or helping to support your pawns. When you can't just you don't usually want to just push your pawns forward without having piece support. Have pieces helping those pawns push forward. So we have both the rooks here, the knight, the bishop, they're all helping the pawns. And of course the pawns are pointing in the center towards the king side, and that's usually a good area to start pushing your other pawns and continuing the attack, and that's what Petrosian did in the game. So his opponent tried to start an attack over here, but Petrosian gets his attack in first. So some pieces are traded, but now there's an opening towards the king here and a threat of this pawn pushing forward to f6, attacking and winning this pinned piece. So the king moves over, and instead of pushing forward now with the f pawn, the e pawn pushes forward, forcing this pawn to attack or capture, I should say. And now the pawn pushes forward, attacking the knight. And the knight jumps forward, but we have a capture. And the pawns are broken apart here, and we have this weak f pawn. So after, in the aftermath of this pawn attack, it allows the pieces to swoop in here. This rook moving in, trapping the king, and attacking the bishop. And so, that's where the game ended here, because we saw, some of the possibilities. It looks like we could play out the best move, which was rook to e6, which it looks like that's what the computer followed up with. And now knight to f4, attacking, it looks like, or just capturing there. So looks like the computer just went with that. I mean, why not grab the material immediately? And so white would just be ahead. So from here, you're just ahead material, and you should be able to push out a win. The knight just jumps up here and blockades the pawn. Because one way to attack with pawns is to push a passed pawn forward and try to promote it. So a good piece to stop that from happening is a knight. So this knight immediately jumps up here to blockade this passed f pawn and slow that down. And it's also closer to the king side, with maybe possible threats in the future, a knight to g6 check move maybe at the right moment. So now the rook tries to take the open file here, and since the king is kind of guarding that file somewhat, the rook moves over to this open g file instead of trying to fight that rook and trading off pieces, although I guess that's an option. But then, maybe the rook would have tried to take control of the g file. So b4, trying to attack over on this side, h5, pushing forward, and now the knight could jump up there if it has to and be protected by this h pawn. So a pawn attack with check, and then we have a capture, which allows the rook to come in, but the king moves here. That way it can keep an eye on this pawn and not let the rook swing over and capture and then have another passed pawn. So the rook moves back up here. Now that is what was recommended. Let me go back real quick. Now it's saying just rook to a3. Something like this. But then that leads to a mate in 17 if you can find it and count that high. All right, so anyway, it recommends attacking the king. The king would have to move here. And now we have knight to e5, a discovered attack with the rook, and the king moving back to h8, and then rook up to here, and then we have rook captures, king to b1, rook all the way to g2. Yeah, it looks like they must be trapped. So we'll see what happens if they try to run. Let's say they try something like this to attack this. Or actually it's saying, let me go back here. Saying to retreat, to g2. Or b2, a1. Okay, so anyway, if they try and make a move that looks normal and attack this pawn, well, then that would allow an attack here. The king has to move. This one comes in and continues the attack. And then we have king forced to move here. Knight, to d7, forking the king and the rook. So anyway, you see how using these pawns to attack and gain space and then letting your pieces funnel in behind them for the attack can be very dangerous. All right, so I'll end the video there. I went a little bit longer than I expected, but I hope it helped and you learned at least a little bit of how to use your pawns to attack. So hopefully you can use them in your own games and not just be stuck wondering, well, what should I do with my pawns? Should I just sacrifice all of them? Anyway, this game shows you a different way to play where you use your pawns to slowly press your advantage, or more quickly at other times. All right, well, thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already to support the channel. Thank you all for watching. Also, feel free to leave comments or suggestions at any time, or requests if there's a particular subject that you would like to hear more about or learn more about. Thank you all for watching, and have a super chess day.